As all of you know, on Sunday, 10 people were wounded by gunfire in a shooting incident on Bourbon Street. I first want to begin by saying how so sorry I am to the victims who have been hurt by this shameful and senseless act of violence. What happened is infuriating. It makes you want to scream or cry or both. And so I want to be clear to the victims and their families and to the people of New Orleans that this will not go unanswered, and we will work around the clock to bring those who were engaged in this senseless act to justice. It unfortunately reminds us of the relentless violence on the streets of New Orleans and across America every day. We are supposed to be one nation, indivisible, with one shared destiny, but the truth of the matter is that across America, and certainly on the streets of New Orleans, there is a constant drumbeat of shootings and death day after day after day. Every year in the United States of America, 15,000 American citizens are killed, and there are countless other shootings. As a matter of fact, every day we lose 40 American citizens. That's one every 35 minutes, and the shootings in some instances are almost incalculable. This is a humanitarian crisis. It's not in some faraway nation, but it's here in our streets. It's in our neighborhoods. It's in our homes. This past weekend, across our country, 36 people were shot in Chicago. 21 people were shot in New York City, 7 in Los Angeles. Indeed, it was Saturday morning in Chicago when a 42-year-old man whose name was Ronnie Amos was shot dead in Humboldt Park, just steps away from his home. The same night, 1,000 miles away in the Bronx, 29-year-old Rodney was shot and killed. On Sunday in East Hollywood, 30-year-old Lavelle Smith was hit after an unknown gunman opened fire in a crowded restaurant, and unfortunately, he did not make it. On Bourbon Street in New Orleans, 10 precious lives were changed forever. Within minutes, our police officers and EMS were on the scene, and I would like to take a minute to personally thank the medical professionals and particularly members of the military who were there, along with other individuals, stepped in to aid the victims and to the citizens that assisted them as well. In the last 48 hours, we've released video evidence that depicts the incident and identified 2 persons of interest and walked door to door to hear from what the business owners and the folks on Bourbon Street had to say. I had a chance yesterday to visit University Medical Center and to visit with and or talk to the victims and or their families that were still in the hospital at that time, to make sure that they knew that the people of New Orleans were sorry for what happened to them and to offer condolences and assistance. I was very encouraged by the faith and the commitment of the families and the fight that they have to go through. I particularly want to ask the people of New Orleans to hold up in their prayers the victims who are continue to be in need of assistance. We are working every day to make our streets safe, to make New Orleans a safe place to live, to work, and to play. But too often, we also have innocent bystanders that are caught in the gunfire as well. In New Orleans, just in the last 10 days, Mr. Aaron Jackson, 52 years old, Deion Simmons, 27 years old, Willie Brown, 45 years old, Julius Dunn, 21 years old, and of course on Friday morning, the son of Clarence Becknell Sr., Clarence Becknell Jr., was taken from us in Gentilly. The culture of this violence continues to threaten our country. I want you to consider this fact, that between 1980 and 2012, 626,000 Americans were killed on the streets of this country. That is more American citizens that were killed in war than all the wars in the 20th century. That would be World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. That is a huge number, and that is why last weekend and then again today, I am making a clarion call to every level of the government to protect our streets, both federal, state, and local. I have sent a letter to President Obama with a copy of a letter that I sent last year requesting that the federal government get back in the business of fighting crime on the streets of America. I have sent a copy of this letter to the Attorney General and to the head of the FBI to remind them of their obligation to help us stem this national epidemic. I've asked them to make a commitment to restore the COPS program that was so instrumental in making the streets of America safe years ago. I've asked them to give us a surge team of federal law enforcement officers from DEA, FBI, ATF, the U.S. Marshal's Office. I've also written to the Secretary of the Department of Interior, who has a police force, and their job is to help protect historic and cultural sites, and the French Quarter is certainly one of those as well. And I've asked them to consider proposing to Congress amendments to allow our U.S. attorneys to prosecute the illegal possession of weapons directly and not as a derivative offense to drug offenses. I've also spoken to the governor. I've written him a letter. I have asked him to assign 100 state police officers to New Orleans on a permanent basis. We serve as the host to the tourism and to the sports entertainment industry. We generate hundreds of millions of dollars for the state of Louisiana, and there are huge state assets in this city, and of course the French Quarter is part of that, and I believe that the state police presence is warranted and would be a welcome addition to our police department. I have asked him to beef up the probation and parole office within the Department of Corrections, and of course to invest in mental health and substance abuse programs. We're also asking for additional funding for public safety through the allocation of a larger portion of the hotel-motel tax to the city and a rededication of 1 penny of the hotel-motel tax from the convention center to generate the resources we need to hire police officers. Today at the local level, I want to thank the city council members. Through their last budgeting practices, they have already put skin in the game and allocated enough money to hire 150 police officers. We are going to continue to recruit, and we continue to reach out to people of the city of New Orleans who may want to serve. I've also sent a copy of these letters to our United States senators and congressional delegation and asking them to advocate on our behalf on the federal ask. I've talked to legislators and sent them copies as well and asked them to advocate on our behalf as it relates to the state ask. And of course, our city council is with us today. The decades of mass murder and shootings in slow motion on the streets of America has to stop. This is not who we are as a nation, and it's certainly not who we are as a people in New Orleans. Morally, economically, spiritually, and for the good of this nation's strength and security, I think we have to do more. It's been happening for a long, long time, but it has to stop, and the time is now. We could spend a lot of time talking about how we got here. We may not all be at fault, but as I've said many, many times, we all have responsibility to act as one people. We're going to continue to work around the clock to see that this investigation goes well and that we bring these individuals to justice. The only way we're going to do that is if the people of the city of New Orleans help us. There are people out there who know who did this. We need you to come forward. We need you to help us make this city safe. It's important that we say clearly and unequivocally this is unacceptable and it has to stop. I'm going to call on the chief now to give you an update of where we are in our investigation, and he will also give you some information about the protections that are in place for the Essence Festival. Please help me welcome Chief Serpas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to all those who are with us. You know, we in the police department obviously send our best wishes to the family members and the 10 people who were injured on Sunday morning, and I would like to send the message to their families and all the families of New Orleans. We have not stopped working on this case since it started. We have non-stop assigned detectives. I can assure you today we know a whole lot more than yesterday, and we're not going to know as much as we're going to know tomorrow. We're making headway. We're getting good tips through Crime Stoppers and good work through detectives following up on leads and making the kinds of investigative steps that we think are appropriate. I can tell you that the minute that we can release new video, we will, but at this time we will not likely have more video today. But that does not mean that we've not made great headway since yesterday on the people that we're looking for. The most important message, call Crime Stoppers or look at your video. We would remind people that the French Quarter was the birthplace of people's individual cameras being used to help us solve crime. Imagine how fast and far a young person can run when they're motivated. You may live on Decatur Street, you may live on Rampart Street, but think about those pictures that you've seen in the videos that have been released and take a look at your cameras just to double check, just to make sure. As it relates to Essence Festival, we want to make sure that the people of New Orleans and our visitors that are arriving in town soon understand. We have a very robust plan and package. On Thursday, the Family Day, there'll be 170 officers in and around the area where the Essence Festival activities will occur, around Decatur Street, Canal Street, the Superdome, MCC. On Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there'll be 500 police officers from the New Orleans Police Department assigned to the downtown core, assigned to the Waldenburg Park area, the Marigny, the Poydras Street corridor, the Convention Street corridor, not to include those officers that will be working at the Superdome or the Morial Convention Center. And on Monday, when everybody leaves the city, we bring out another package of 20 to 25 officers who will make sure we can keep Canal Street flowing. We can do this because the mayor and the council supported the 2014 budget, and we have funds available to use to ensure that we not only have 500 officers, but we're supplementing that with $300,000 in overtime to ensure that there is a very visible presence in and around the downtown core. I spoke with Colonel Edmondson yesterday, and in addition to our 500 officers in the downtown core, he's going to assign 20 to 25 troopers to give us some assistance, which we gratefully appreciate. At the end of the day, we are not going to stop until we find these people, and I want to thank the public, and I want to thank you, the media, for putting out those pictures quickly, and as soon as we get more information, we will put it out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, that's a good point. Yes, Councilmember had reminded me. It's a very good point. The way we do these deployments, we do not take the district officers who are normally assigned to your neighborhoods. We're using the officers and the detectives that are part of the centralized detective function. We're using detectives in the districts who are not providing direct calls for service response. So each and every one of the 8 districts maintain their standard staffing protocol and profile on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And those 500 additional officers are a combination of officers coming from other parts of the department and overtime to make sure we have that footprint covered in the downtown core. Thank you.
Please help me welcome Mr. Kenneth Polita, U.S. Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that enough is enough simply because this shooting happened on Bourbon Street. The fact of the matter is that would minimize past events like the Mother's Day shooting or any other shooting that has happened on our streets, whether it was last week, last month, or last year. Those of us who have lived with the threat and persistent drumbeat of violence in our communities, or who have even worse, lost loved ones to violence, for those individuals, enough came a long time ago. The mayor is absolutely right. We need more soldiers in this battle. Just this morning, my office received approval from Washington to hire 3 additional experienced AUSAs, all of whom will be tasked with the responsibility of prosecuting violent crime in our region. And it is not enough. So I will remain in the ear or in the face of those individuals to make sure that we have the resources, not just in my office, but with the FBI, the ATF, the DEA, the U.S. Marshals, to ensure that this is a battle that we can win. Let me talk briefly about the consent decree. You know, I was not the U.S. Attorney when this document was negotiated. There's a lot of good in that document, but it is not perfect. There are still some problems. But I will not stand idly by and let problems fester. This is a document that is supposed to work for us, not against us. I don't live in Washington, D.C. I live here in Southeast Louisiana in New Orleans. And to my city officials here, you have my commitment that I will make sure that this is a document that works for us. And that includes all of our brothers and sisters who wear the uniform of the NOPD, as well as all of the residents of this region who they are sworn to protect and to serve. Last but not least, let me address the general public. I previously used the term battle. Whether you recognize it or not, whether you accept it or not, you are in the middle of a battle, the new battle for the city of New Orleans. Either you are for a safe and peaceful New Orleans or you are against us. Standing on the sidelines is no longer an option. Each and every day, we need to be engaged in this process of trying to win this battle. Whether you're involved in intervention, prevention, or law enforcement. You can no longer stand on the sidelines. What it also means is that if you have information, you have to come forward. I understand that safety is a concern for many of our residents when it comes to providing information. Contact the NOPD, contact our district attorney's office, contact my office, contact Crime Stoppers. We have the ability, we have the know-how to protect our witnesses. But for those of you who are holding on to information under the guise of protecting individuals in your community who have perpetrated violence in our streets, under the concept of no snitching or stop snitching, let me tell you something. That is the handiwork of the devil. It is one of his worst lies ever perpetrated. As a federal prosecutor, I am in the business of information. Let me tell you, when the bright lights of a federal prosecution gets onto someone in their face, you know what starts to happen? They start talking. All of those individuals who are out there telling you don't snitch and stop snitching, when they're behind bars, they start talking. They start talking. I had the privilege and the honor of prosecuting some of the individuals in Baltimore, Maryland, who were responsible for perpetrating this lie, that stop snitching video, a heroin conspiracy. You know what I call those individuals? I call them cooperators, because when they all got under the bright lights, they snitched. Come forward. Come forward. It is no longer acceptable to stand on the sidelines. That concept is a lie. It is a farce. It is an excuse. Help us win this battle for New Orleans. Thank you.
I want to thank, certainly I want to thank the NOPD and all of the first responders in this incident. They did an incredible job. Crime Stoppers, certainly our thoughts and prayers are with the victims, but our thoughts and prayers are also with the individuals who were involved in this incident, and particularly their families. And I'm speaking to them. If you were the person who fired the shots, turn yourself in. The video surveillance footage that we have is incredible. We're getting a lot of tips through Crime Stoppers. We're getting a lot of communication from the public about this case. But I'm asking you to do the right thing. If you're not going to do the right thing, what Crime Stoppers has done is given everyone around you the opportunity to come through us anonymously, which means they'll never be identified, they don't have to have this fear, and to give us the information we need to make a quick arrest. Now, Crime Stoppers did two things with their reward money in this case. First off, if you can just give us the weapon, the gun, give us the gun that can be linked to this crime, we get that gun, you're going to get $1,000 for each gun. If you're going to give us the information on one of the shooters, it's $2,500, and it's going to be on the arrest of that shooter. We typically pay arrest and indictment. It's going to be on the arrest. So there's a $5,000 reward at this point. There is a $1,000 just gun reward. But more importantly, do the right thing. Give us a call. Thank you.
All right, questions? Direct them to whoever.
For the chief, are y'all certain there were two gunmen at this point? We've seen video that shows apparently just one, but were there two gunmen?
No, we believe it's likely that there was two people shooting with two different types of weapons, and we've recovered some of that evidence. It's about as far as we can go into that right now.
Can you see how many shots were fired?
Not yet.
Have you done ballistic testing on?
We have.
And y'all don't have the weapons over this point?
No.
What kind of guns were they?
Firearms.
You can't go into any more detail.
Not just yet.
Can you talk about, we talked about the numbers for Essence Fest, but can you talk about the number of cops who were working that Saturday night? There were 4 on foot on Bourbon Street, a few mounted patrols, but is that enough for a Saturday night? And what happens after Essence Fest when it comes to the number of police in the 8th District?
So the event on this terrible shooting that occurred on Sunday night is a non-event weekend. We just had a regular Saturday or Sunday into Sunday morning. There was a total of 27, about 27 officers working in the 8th District. 9 of them were assigned to specific Bourbon Street duties. The 16 others, or the 17 others, were assigned to answering calls for service throughout the district, doing investigations in the evening on criminal investigations, narcotics investigations, and task force kind of work. 27 people all working Saturday into Sunday is what was out there. Of course, we'd all like more. I mean, that's not the issue here. The issue is that's a lot of people given the way we're able to deploy today. Essence, we naturally bump up for Essence. This same plan, and it's important that you know this, the Essence plan was issued before this event happened, so we're constantly planning, looking at last year's events. Over 500 officers in the downtown area for Essence is a robust package because we're going to have a lot of wonderful tourists here. So those two things operate kind of independent of one another.
What about after Essence Fest, once the big festival
It would
weekend
look-
is over? Are you going to ramp up police patrols in the 8th District, particularly because you lost 30% of them in the last year?
Well, what we're doing every week is because, and this is really important, and we talk about this a lot, and I hope everybody hears this, the way we're budgeting now, that started in 2012 with the mayor and the council support, we're using our vacant salary dollars to use overtime. We're putting anywhere from 18 to 20 extra shifts per day on the streets, so the 8th District does exactly the same thing. The 8th District has just about 100 police officers normally assigned today, and the 8th District is going to have about 100 to 120 hours of overtime every week to have extra officers answering the radio, have extra officers doing proactive police work, doing undercover work. I think that the combination of those two is what's giving us the best foot forward right now.
Is there a tipping point when it comes to overtime? How much is too much?
You never want to forget that the ultimate solution is the hiring, and that's where we're going now. For example, as you all know, but right now we have 6 former employees who we've agreed to take back. So we're starting to see a turn. People who left want to come back. We want them back. We have over 80 people who are in background investigation today. The rate of which people are successfully getting through background is going up slightly. I talked about this with the council the other day. So we're seeing that momentum. And as we move through 14, 15, 16, 17, we're just going to keep hiring, like the mayor said. We're going to hire every day until we get where we want to be.
Do you think this shooting could have been prevented with more officers on the streets? Because I know there were some there within seconds. You could see it on the video. And if not, if it can't be prevented with more officers on the streets, how do we prevent something like this?
2 ways to answer that. One, I will, and I know the other one, the mayor will. It's about the truth of how young men make choices. There was a very good piece written and published in one of y'all's journals today. And it talks to David Kennedy, and it talked to other psychologists, and it talked to other sociologists, and that sometimes these young men are committing these brazen acts, and they're not paying attention to what's around them or why or anything that they do could make a difference. The Boston bombing, there was police all over the place when that happened, and these 2 men decided to do what they did. We had, in the very first months of our administration, a shooting in the 100 block of Bourbon where police officers almost got powder burns. When somebody decides to kill somebody, they often don't care what's all around them. So the NOLA for Life piece is the other piece of that.
Thank you, Chief. I do want to talk about that. To keep the facts straight, there were 3 officers less than a block away from this particular instance. As the Chief said, he gave you an example of how on the 100 block of Bourbon, on Canal Street, there were police officers actually standing, I think, 25 feet away from where the shooting occurred. There have been myriad of examples of people making very, very bad choices when there was a very strong law enforcement presence there. And so, as Councilmember Gray and I have spoken about, Councilmember Ramsey and other people, you cannot just police your way and incarcerate your way out of this complete and total problem. We have got to find a way to get on the front side of this issue and to get very early and to change what I have termed the culture of violence. What that means is behavioral patterns that have formed over time that cement themselves in place where young people are resolving their differences through a gun and through murder, and obviously complete and total disregard for innocent citizens. Of course, the Mother's Day shooting last year is about as brazen, if not more so, than this one. Complete and total disregard for the life and safety of other individuals, irrespective of where they come from, what they're doing, and what they happen to be. That culture has got to change. All the police officers in the world are not going to change that particular problem. Having said that, I think all of us have now talked about publicly the need to have 1,600 police officers, because we think that's the right number to not only secure the city, but to make people feel safe as well. That is why you have me reaching out so aggressively to the federal government, to the state government, because in the last 10 years, they have been, for the most part, absent in terms of their responsibility of taking care of public safety on the streets of America. It is, in fact, a national priority, and it is a federal responsibility to help us police the streets of America. This changed after September 11th. The FBI turned its attention to terrorism, and they turned away from street crime as a priority. We're asking the FBI to think about that as well. We can do both and. It doesn't have to be either or. The United States of America has spent a huge amount of money standing up police departments in other countries, in Iraq, Afghanistan, particularly Medellin, Colombia, where we have spent federal dollars hiring police officers for cities that are not even in the United States of America, while simultaneously telling mayors across America you are on your own. I believe that is wrong. And that is why I am asking the president to think about prioritizing that. I'm also asking the president and Congress to think about the COPS program. It was one of the most successful programs in the history of the United States. It was started by President Clinton. It was initiated by Senator Biden. It used to be funded at $4 billion. It is now 88% less than that since 1996. It was one of the tools that created a wonderful partnership that helped. And so if you have more money for us to hire through the COPS program and you have a robust presence, especially with violence from the DEA, ATF, you can supplement what we're doing on a local level. The same thing is true about the state of Louisiana. Your city is the host to major sports, entertainment, and cultural events. 9 million visitors come in to this city every year. They pay taxes. Most of that tax goes to the state. And what we need is for the state of Louisiana to take responsibility for that which is theirs. And that means that we need state troopers down here manning the highway. I know that you've noticed that they do it between the bridge and the 17th Street Canal, but they stop. That's their responsibility. We need them to man the Crescent City connection, and we need them to have a robust complement of state troopers on the ground protecting state assets like the Superdome, the arena, the convention center, and of course the French Quarter, which is an international destination. I am very thankful to Colonel Mike Edmondson. Every time that we have called and asked him, he has been there. The state troopers have been great partners for them, but this is outside of their control. They can only respond to the assets they have now. So now I'm calling for the governor. I'm talking to the legislature. I've asked our legislative delegation to help lead this effort, and they have agreed to do so, to rejoin this discussion about making sure that everyone shows up. And of course, we are doing our part, and that we are beginning to hire 150 new police officers. We will march towards that 1,600 number, and we will get there. But at the end of the day, even when we have that force at full value, this is not going to get done unless the people of New Orleans decide and demand that they have a safe city. And as our U.S. attorney said, there is no place to run, there is no place to hide. You have got to pick sides. We know that there are people out there who know who did this. You should turn them in. You should make sure that you make the commitment to turn this city around. And by the way, families, parents, pastors, everybody has got to be involved in transforming the culture of death and violence on the streets of New Orleans into a culture of peace so that we can all live here together. Because no matter who's sitting in this chair where I'm sitting right now, or who the police chief is, or the U.S. attorney, or et cetera, if we don't change that, we will continue to be how we have been in this city for as many years as we possibly can count. This has been going on for a long time, and unless we do something different, it will not change. Enough is enough. And as a U.S. attorney said, that happened a long time ago for a lot of people.
Mayor, given the fact that 6 of the 10 people shot were from out of state, could this impact tourism? Are city officials already fielding calls from potential tourists who are concerned? And could that even impact future big events?
Thank you for the question. It's a good question. I have spoken to all of the executives at the Essence Festival. They are fully confident that this is not just a New Orleans problem, that it happens all over America. And as a consequence, they are fully confident that their guests will be protected, as am I. They also know that there's very little that you can do to protect their people from such senseless and shameless acts. I am concerned when anybody gets hurt in the city of New Orleans and wherever they get hurt. Of course, bad stories are going to go out about New Orleans, but every one of the individuals that you talk to has basically said, I know it's not your city per se. This is a problem that persists across America, and quite frankly, I'm just as concerned about the person who gets shot in the lower 9th Ward and in the East and in Gerdtown and in Back-of-Town and on the West Bank as I am with a citizen or a visitor that gets shot on Bourbon Street. Quite frankly, when you look at the nature of this crime, this is not a Bourbon Street specific crime. This could have happened a block away, or it could have happened in Pensiontown, or it could have happened in Broadmoor, because it happens all the time. And we know that everybody, whether they're a visitor or a citizen, has got to be protected in this city wherever they are. And of course, as I said, it is part law enforcement, but there's a lot more to it than that. And that is why NOLA for Life, works really hard to be that robust, that deep, and that wide. But as I've said many, many times, and I've made this clarion call, we cannot do it by ourselves. We have to have help and assistance And essentially, if we get that, and the people decide that they're not going to tolerate it anymore, that will be the day when we begin to come to the end of this very difficult period of time that we're in.
Mayor, would you say this is the largest request for assistance from the federal government since shortly after Katrina?
No, and it's not the first time. I have been talking about this since my inaugural speech in my first term. I have been talking about it for years, and so it is a continual request that has come over time. And quite frankly, we're not asking them for more. We're just asking them to do what they're supposed to be doing, not over and above what they were supposed to do. But the federal government, for the most part, has been absent from the fight on violent crime in the city, less what they've given to the U.S. attorneys over a very, very difficult time. And the U.S. the U.S. attorney can't do much about it except say to the Attorney General, this is absolutely right. What we're seeing on the ground here is absolutely real. I am shocked by the lack of general knowledge that leaders in this nation have about the volume of shootings and murders on the street of the United States of America. We can't do anything but compare it to the number of shootings and death that take place overseas, and when those comparisons are made, folks get into an either-or situation. It is possible for the people and for the United States of America to be strong abroad and to be strong at home. As a matter of fact, you can't be strong abroad if you're weak at home, and the United States has to get their head focused on the fact that we have a problem throughout the United States of America. We certainly have it in New Orleans. We are, as I've said, this nation's laboratory for innovation and change, and we're also the canary in the coal mine. And the things that are happening here are happening all over the country. And if you just think about, go look at the dailies in Philadelphia, go look at them in Baltimore, go look in Los Angeles, go look in Chicago, and everywhere in between, mayors across America are struggling with this problem and need assistance and help from our partners. The United States of America would never send a general or soldiers into a war without the resources that they need to get the job done, and they would never leave anybody behind. But that is exactly what's happening on domestic soil. And I think the mayors of America are sending out this clarion call, and unfortunately, it takes events like this to wake us up, to force us to stop, to force us to look, and we think it's an exception to the rule. It is not, and it has got to change.
The 27 officers that were working in the 8th District, can you clarify, were they actually physically on the street Saturday night into Sunday morning around the time of the shooting?
No, we've always said the same thing. I mean, there's 27 total officers working. There were 9 who were assigned to Bourbon Street, 4 officers on footbeat and 5 on mounted. The other officers were in cars working throughout the 8th District in total. The other thing that's really important is that when an event like this happens, what we expect the police officers to do is exactly what they did. They rushed to the scene while people were running away. They began to provide medical care, which is the first priority, which also includes communicating with EMS, giving them entry routes, clearing up entry routes. We also expect them to protect scene evidence. At the same time this chaotic moment's going on, like Mother's Day, you have police officers who are making sure people aren't stepping on casings, that we're identifying where all that information is. The next thing these officers are doing is finding witnesses. All of this is happening within a blink of an eye. All of this is happening before the first emergency medical services unit gets there. And then one of our officers saw some people running that gave him cause for concern, and he was chasing them down at the exact same incident the first officers were making it to the scene. So it's kind of back to the question that was raised. When things do happen, what do we want the officers to do? And from that perspective, I've not seen anything that wouldn't give me anything but great pride in their ability to handle a very confusing situation incredibly quickly, gathering very important physical evidence that we have in our possession, getting aid to the people who needed the aid. So that's kind of what we do after it. But there were 27 total people assigned to the 8th District that night. 9 were specifically assigned to Bourbon Street walk and beat coverage. The other 18, I should say, were in different functions of answering the radio calls, working on detective cases, and looking for narcotics offenders.
Chief, the 27 were actually on duty
Yes.
at the time?
Yeah. Various shifts throughout the night, but during that period of time.
Chief, there's that video that shows the shooting that happened. Some people have talked in the streets and said it looks like the cops just standing there, not doing much, not much of a sense of urgency. Did he respond appropriately?
The cop that I saw was actually talking on his radio the whole time, and while he's talking on that radio, he's doing a few things. He's telling EMS where he is. He's giving an assessment of what it looks like, all right? These are hypotheticals of what he would be doing. But I saw him talking on his radio. But what's not clear is that there's other video cameras, and you see other things that the cops are doing and going on with. So in this particular case, officers got there, started rendering aid, which also includes giving directions to EMS while they're en route, what streets to use. We'll make sure we open up this street. Things are going on that y'all don't know about. There's other officers blocks away making sure the streets are open to get EMS in there fast, like Mother's Day, same kind of thing. So no, at this point, I think it's way too early to determine what he may or may not have been doing beyond what we already think he was doing.
With the amount of surveillance video and witnesses and cops on the street, what are the challenges in actually finding the suspects now that it's been more than 48 hours?
Well, you've seen the videos. Not all the videos are like a selfie, you know. So, I mean, sometimes you don't get the right video angle that you need.
Sure, releasing a suspect description even.
But you know what our job is? We have to bring cases that are successful for prosecution. And the most important thing to do is not to rush to a bad judgment. So we're developing information at a good flow. The most important thing to that is this. The information hasn't stopped. The information keeps coming in. You know, we're like good journalists, right? I'm sure y'all research heavily everything you say before you say it. Well, we've got to do the same thing. We have to research everything we're going to do before we make an arrest, before we make a description, before we release a name, and then bring it to the district attorney for prosecution.